When you look at yourself in the mirror, you might believe that the person staring back is entirely known to you. You recognize your features, your voice, your daily habits, and the way you react to the world. But beneath this surface, there exists a deeper realm, an ocean of thoughts, memories, instincts, and long-forgotten desires that shapes your actions far more than you realize. Sigmund Freud, often called the father of psychoanalysis, described this hidden territory as the unconscious, a vast reservoir where unspoken fears, repressed wishes, and unresolved conflicts reside. For Freud, most of what drives human behavior lies outside the boundaries of conscious awareness. Irvin Yalom, though belonging to a different school of thought, complements this view with an existential lens. He suggests that what we bury deep inside are not only personal conflicts, but also the great universal anxieties tied to being human. Death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness. To understand the unseen depths of the human mind is to recognize that life is not guided solely by rational choices. You may think you decided your career path because of logic, or that you chose a partner purely out of love and compatibility. Yet, if you dig deeper, you may find other forces at play. The shadow of your parents' expectations, the echo of a childhood wound, or even the unconscious need to prove your worth to the world. All of these influences live beneath the surface. Carl Jung referred to this hidden dimension as the shadow, the collection of traits and impulses that we deny, repress, or fail to acknowledge. According to Jung, we cannot become whole unless we confront this shadow, because it constantly leaks into our lives through projections, fears, and irrational reactions. Irvin Yalom's work brings another dimension to this. In his book, Existential Psychotherapy, he writes, "Though the physicality of death destroys us, the idea of death saves us." What he means is that awareness of our mortality, often buried deep in the unconscious, shapes how we live, even when we refuse to face it directly. The hidden depths of the mind are not simply a storehouse of repressed memories, but also the quiet stage where our most profound fears perform their silent play. You may avoid thinking about death, yet that avoidance might push you into overworking, into clinging to relationships, or into anxieties you cannot explain. Freud often compared the mind to an iceberg. Only a small fraction is visible above water, while the massive body lies hidden below. Yalom modernizes this metaphor by showing that the submerged part of the mind is not only about personal neuroses, but about the universal human condition. This is why therapy, in his view, is not just about treating symptoms. It is about helping people confront the ultimate concerns buried in the unconscious, because when these forces remain hidden, they quietly rule our lives. Consider the person who never takes risks, who always follows the safest path. On the surface, it may seem like a rational preference for security, but beneath, in the unseen depths, there may be a paralyzing fear of failure, rejection, or even death. Another person might constantly seek attention and admiration, appearing confident, even arrogant. Yet in the depths of their mind lies a fragile self that fears insignificance and isolation. The human mind is like a stage where the actors we see are only half the cast. The real drama is unfolding behind the curtain. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, added another perspective with his concept of logotherapy. He believed that the unconscious is not only filled with repressed drives, but also with what he called the will to meaning. In Man's Search for Meaning, he described how even in the concentration camps, where suffering was overwhelming, individuals could survive and endure if they found meaning. This will to meaning, often hidden beneath layers of despair or confusion, is a powerful force within the human mind that waits to be uncovered. To dive into the unseen depths of the mind is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying, because you may encounter truths you have avoided for years, the pain of abandonment, the realization of your mortality, the recognition of unfulfilled desires. Liberating, because in facing these truths, you also gain power over them. As Yalom often reminds his readers and patients, denial may keep you safe temporarily, but it also imprisons you. Only by bringing the unconscious to light can you live with greater freedom, authenticity, and courage. Imagine your mind as a house. The rooms you use daily, the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, represent your conscious awareness. They are familiar, predictable, and well lit. But below the floorboards, there is a basement you rarely visit. In that basement, old boxes are stacked. Memories you've hidden away, fears you refuse to unpack, dreams you abandoned. You may hear faint noises from that basement. A sudden panic attack, a dream that unsettles you, a burst of anger that feels disproportionate. These noises are reminders that the basement is still alive and that its contents are shaping your life whether you look at them or not. Psychoanalysis, existential therapy, and other schools of thought all converge on one crucial truth. The human mind contains hidden depths that cannot be ignored. To live authentically, you must be willing to descend into that basement, to open the boxes, to face what you find. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is part of you, carrying both the wounds of your past and the potential for your transformation. And as Yalom writes, the act of revealing oneself fully to another and still being accepted may be the major vehicle of therapeutic help. The journey into the unseen depths of your mind is not only about confronting darkness, but also about discovering the light of acceptance, meaning, and freedom that lies hidden there. Fear is one of the most primal forces of the human mind. It begins as a survival mechanism, an instinct that warns us of danger and keeps us alive. But unlike other animals, humans are burdened with a unique awareness. We know that one day, inevitably, our lives will end. This awareness, even when buried deep beneath the surface, creates a powerful undercurrent that shapes nearly every decision we make. Irvin Yalom, in his book Staring at the Sun, argues that the fear of death is the silent backdrop of human existence. Though the physicality of death destroys us, he writes, the idea of death saves us. Din. What he means is that our confrontation or avoidance of mortality determines how we live, how we love, and how we find meaning. To understand the fear that shapes us all, we must first see that it is not just about death itself, but about the existential concerns that branch out from it. Yalom identifies four: death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness. Each of these fears lurks in the depths of the human psyche, often unacknowledged, yet constantly influencing our choices. For example, the fear of freedom may sound strange at first. Freedom, after all, is celebrated as a virtue. But in existential terms, freedom means responsibility. It means realizing that your life is not pre-written, that you alone must choose, and that there are no absolute guidelines to follow. This is a terrifying truth for many, and it explains why people so often cling to authority, tradition, or rigid belief systems. They want protection from the dizzying weight of choice. The second great concern, isolation, is another fear that haunts us all. No matter how close we become to others, there remains a fundamental gap. No one can truly step inside our mind, and no one can experience the world exactly as we do. This existential isolation creates an ache within us, and much of what we do, forming relationships, joining communities, even losing ourselves in social media, is an attempt to escape that loneliness. Yet paradoxically, it is in facing this isolation that we often grow stronger. Yalom suggests that acknowledging our solitude is the first step toward authentic connection, because only then can we relate to others as whole individuals, rather than as antidotes to our fear. The third concern, Meaninglessness may be the most paralyzing of all. If death is inevitable, if freedom is overwhelming, and if isolation is inescapable, then what is the point of it all? Many philosophers have wrestled with this question. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps of World War II, believed that meaning is not something handed to us, but something we must create. In Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. My fear of meaninglessness can drive people to despair, but it can also push them to discover purpose in love, in work, or in the simple act of enduring." Freud, though less existential in his outlook, acknowledged that anxiety, the conscious echo of unconscious fear, is at the heart of human suffering. For him, much of anxiety stemmed from the battle between instinctual desires and the demands of society. Jung, on the other hand, emphasized that our fear is often projected onto external symbols. In his theory of archetypes, monsters and demons represent inner fears that we have not yet faced. This is why myths and stories across cultures echo with themes of dragons, shadows, or the underworld. They are metaphors for the universal fears embedded in the human mind. But Yalom takes it further. He argues that these fears are not simply obstacles to be overcome, but gateways to deeper living. To deny death is to deny life. To flee freedom is to flee authenticity. To cover up isolation is to sacrifice genuine connection. To ignore meaninglessness is to miss the opportunity for self-created purpose. The fear that shapes us all, then, is not a prison. It is an invitation. It is a call to courage, to creativity, and to transformation. Think for a moment about your daily life. Why do you work as hard as you do? Why do you chase recognition, success, or wealth? Beneath the surface, these pursuits often stem from a desire to outwit death, to leave a mark, to prove that your existence mattered. Why do you cling to certain relationships, even when they no longer nourish you? Perhaps because the fear of isolation feels heavier than the weight of unhappiness. And why do you sometimes silence your own voice, conforming to expectations? Because the fear of freedom, of making the wrong choice, can feel unbearable. The existentialists remind us that fear is not the enemy. Fear is a teacher. To live without fear would be to live without awareness. What matters is not eliminating fear, but facing it with openness. Yalom often describes therapy as a space where these ultimate concerns can be spoken aloud, where the unnameable fears of existence are brought into the light. Once named, they lose some of their power. Once shared, they open the door to solidarity and compassion. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon. You feel the dizzying pull of the void, and your first instinct is to step back. But if you stay only in the safe distance, you will never see the breathtaking view. Fear works the same way. It warns you, it unsettles you, but it also offers the chance to see reality more clearly. And in that clarity lies freedom. The kind of freedom that allows you not only to endure life, but to embrace it fully. The fear that shapes us all will never disappear. It is part of being human. But when you stop running from it, when you let it become your companion instead of your enemy, something shifts. Life becomes richer, relationships become deeper, and even suffering can be transformed into meaning. As Yalom insists, the way to value life, the way to feel compassion for others, the way to love anything with the greatest depth is to be aware that these experiences are destined to end. The fear that shapes us all is, paradoxically, also the force that can awaken us to the incredible power hidden in the human mind. No one exists in isolation, no matter how much we might convince ourselves otherwise. From the moment we are born, our sense of self is shaped through relationships. The cry of a newborn means little unless there is someone to respond, to feed, to comfort, to recognize that life has arrived. And in a very real sense, that moment of recognition, when one person affirms the presence of another, is the foundation of human identity. Without it, we drift into emptiness. This is why psychoanalyst Erich Fromm once wrote that love is the only sane and satisfactory answer to the problem of human existence. For him, and for Irvin Yalom, relationships are not simply optional. They are the very ground upon which our inner lives are built. In therapy, Yalom insists that the most powerful tool is not theory, nor technique, nor even the mastery of clinical skills. It is the relationship itself. He often said that therapy is a relationship, and that healing happens when one human being dares to reveal themselves to another, fully and without pretense, and is still accepted. This moment of radical honesty, what Yalom calls the here and now encounter, has the power to dissolve years of hidden shame or isolation. What is revealed is that much of the suffering we carry stems not only from internal conflicts, but from our inability to be truly seen by another human being. Carl Jung added another dimension with his concept of individuation, the process by which a person becomes their authentic self. But he argued that individuation does not happen in solitude. Instead, it unfolds through the mirror of others. Jung famously said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." This idea captures the essence of how relationships unlock the self. Alone, you may be blind to your patterns, your defenses, your hidden wounds. In the presence of another, those aspects come alive, reflected back to you in ways you cannot deny. Consider the dynamics of everyday relationships. A partner's complaint about neglect may reveal not only their needs, but also your own avoidance of intimacy. A friend's admiration may uncover a strength you had overlooked in yourself. Even conflict has its value. In anger, in disappointment, in frustration, we encounter the raw material of who we are beneath the polished surface. Yalom emphasizes that these moments are not interruptions of life. They are life itself, the crucible in which authenticity is tested and revealed. Fromm, in his book The Art of Loving, argued that love is not merely a feeling but an active practice, a discipline. To love another person requires maturity, responsibility, and courage. It is not about losing oneself in another, nor about clinging to them as a shield against isolation, but about affirming their existence while maintaining one's own. This balance between autonomy and connection is one of the central paradoxes of human life. We fear isolation, yet we also fear engulfment. True relationships help us navigate this paradox, teaching us that it is possible to be fully ourselves while also being deeply connected to another. At a deeper level, relationships force us to confront the existential fear of isolation described earlier. We are born alone, we die alone, and yet, in between, we ache to share our lives with others. Yalom suggests that while no relationship can erase this existential isolation, genuine encounters can bridge the gap in profound ways. In moments of vulnerability, when you confess a weakness, when you admit a fear, when you share a dream, you discover that your inner world, once hidden, resonates with another. This recognition, this shared humanity, is transformative. It reminds you that though you are separate, you are not alone. But relationships also demand courage. To open yourself to another is to risk rejection. To trust is to invite betrayal. To love is to expose your heart to the possibility of loss. Freud observed that people often avoid intimacy for this very reason. Instead, they retreat into defenses, obsession with work, pursuit of power, or shallow connections that protect them from deeper vulnerability. Yet, as Yalom reminds us, defenses may shield us from pain, but they also shield us from joy. Without the risk of openness, there can be no authentic connection. And without authentic connection, the self remains locked, hidden, incomplete. Even in the darkest of circumstances, the power of relationships shines through. Viktor Frankl, reflecting on his years in the concentration camps, described how the memory of his wife sustained him through unimaginable suffering. Though separated from her, the bond he felt gave him meaning, reminding him that love could outlast even the brutality of death. "For the first time in my life I saw the truth," he wrote. "The truth that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire." Frankl's testimony shows that relationships are not only about presence, but also about the enduring imprint of one's soul upon another. The human mind, for all its complexity, cannot unlock its full potential in isolation. Our unconscious patterns, our fears, our hopes, they all find clarity when mirrored in the eyes of another. The relationship becomes a doorway into self-discovery. This is why Yalom insists that growth is not about abstract insight alone, but about lived relational experience. In revealing ourselves to others, we reveal ourselves to ourselves. Imagine standing before a mirror. Alone, you see only the surface, your face, your expression, perhaps a hint of fatigue in your eyes. But when another person looks at you, when they respond, when they reflect back not only what you show, but also what you hide, you encounter a deeper mirror. Their presence awakens parts of you that would otherwise remain dormant. That is the true power of relationships. They unlock the hidden rooms of the self, rooms that cannot be opened by solitary reflection. And so, if the unseen depths of the mind are shaped by unconscious forces, and if the fears we carry shape our choices, then relationships are the bridge that allows us to confront both. Through others, we gain the courage to face our fears, the clarity to understand our depths, and the strength to live authentically. The power of relationships is not only that they connect us to others, they connect us finally to ourselves. Suffering is one of the few experiences that all human beings share. No matter who you are, no matter how much wealth, power, or status you accumulate, suffering will find its way into your life. It arrives in many forms: grief, illness, loss, betrayal, failure, and it can feel overwhelming, like a force that strips away meaning and hope. At first glance, suffering seems like the great enemy of life, something to avoid at all costs. But if we listen to the voices of Irvin Yalom, Viktor Frankl, and others who have walked through the valleys of human despair, we begin to see that suffering is not merely destruction. It holds within it a hidden strength, a seed of transformation that, if faced with courage, can unlock deeper dimensions of the self. Viktor Frankl's story is perhaps the most powerful testimony to this truth. In man's search for meaning, Frankl describes his years in Nazi concentration camps, where every shred of dignity was stripped away, where survival itself seemed like a daily miracle. And yet, even in the midst of unimaginable cruelty, he observed that some prisoners endured not simply because of physical strength, but because of their ability to find meaning in suffering. In some way, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, Frankl wrote. For him, the human spirit had the extraordinary capacity to transform pain into purpose. Even when life circumstances cannot be changed, the freedom to choose one's attitude remains. Irvin Yalom, though writing in a different context, echoes a similar insight. In his existential approach, suffering often stems from our confrontation with life's ultimate concerns: death, isolation, freedom, and meaninglessness. These encounters are painful, even terrifying. But they are also the very doorways through which we can achieve authentic living. Yalom tells the story of patients who come to therapy broken by grief or paralyzed by fear, only to discover that in facing the rawness of suffering, they uncover resilience, courage, and a renewed sense of what matters most. Though the idea of death may fill us with dread, Yalom once noted, it also saves us, for it compels us to live more fully. In this way, suffering can awaken us from complacency, reminding us that life is fragile and precious. Freud saw suffering as inevitable, a part of the human condition. He argued that civilization itself is built on the repression of desires, which creates unavoidable tension and unhappiness. For him, psychoanalysis was a way of helping people transform neurotic misery into ordinary human unhappiness. Jung, on the other hand, offered a more hopeful vision. He believed suffering is the crucible in which individuation occurs, the process by which a person becomes whole. Pain, for Jung, forces us to confront the shadow, the denied and hidden parts of ourselves. Without suffering, there is no transformation. Without the wound, there is no healing. This idea resonates deeply with Yalom's perspective. He often observed that the most profound breakthroughs in therapy come not from avoiding suffering, but from entering into it fully. A patient grieving the death of a loved one, for example, may initially want to numb the pain or distract themselves with activity. But when encouraged to confront the grief directly, to weep, to remember, to express the anguish, they begin to discover that the intensity of the pain is a reflection of the intensity of their love. In acknowledging this, they come to realize that love, though it ends in loss, remains one of life's most powerful affirmations. Suffering then becomes a testament to the depth of human connection, rather than a meaningless wound. At the same time, suffering strips away illusions. It removes the superficial layers of identity, the roles, the possessions, the pretenses, and reveals what truly matters. Frankl noted that in the camps, prisoners who once lived by wealth or social status were reduced to the same fragile condition as everyone else. What remained was the raw question: what is the meaning of my existence? In a strange way, suffering democratizes the human experience, placing everyone on the same ground. And on that ground, the possibility of finding inner strength emerges. Yalom tells us that suffering can also be a gift when shared. In the therapeutic relationship, the act of revealing one's pain to another human being and still being accepted is itself healing. The burden of suffering feels lighter when it is not carried alone. This reminds us of an essential truth. While suffering is personal, the strength to endure it often comes through connection. We may suffer alone, but we heal together. Consider how suffering changes perspective. A person who survives a life-threatening illness often emerges with a renewed appreciation for simple joys. The taste of food, the sound of laughter, the warmth of the sun. Loss forces us to recognize the impermanence of everything, and paradoxically, it is this impermanence that makes life precious. Without suffering, we might drift through life taking everything for granted. With suffering, we are jolted awake to the fragile beauty of existence. In modern culture, where comfort and convenience are idolized, we often see suffering as failure, as something shameful to hide. But psychoanalysis, existential therapy, and philosophy remind us that suffering is not a detour from life. It is life. It is part of the fabric of human existence. The hidden strength lies not in escaping suffering, but in allowing it to shape us into beings capable of depth, compassion, and meaning. The paradox is clear: suffering can destroy us, but it can also be the very force that rebuilds us. When faced honestly, suffering strips us down to our essence and reveals an inner resilience we never knew we had. As Frankl so profoundly put it, "What is to give light must endure burning." Our suffering, when embraced, becomes the fire that illuminates our humanity. There comes a point in every life when the masks we wear begin to feel heavier than the face beneath them. From childhood onward, we are taught who we should be. Parents, teachers, society at large, they all hand us scripts to follow. Be successful, be strong, be agreeable, be respectable. These scripts protect us, help us fit in, and create the illusion of safety. But over time, many of us discover a quiet ache, a whisper from deep within that says, "This is not who I truly am." That whisper is the call of the authentic self, the part of us that longs to live not according to external expectations, but in alignment with our own essence. Irvin Yalom often spoke about authenticity as a central goal of psychotherapy. He believed that the confrontation with death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness strips away illusions and forces us to face the question of who we really are. In existential psychotherapy, Yalom writes that avoidance of these ultimate concerns often results in a life lived superficially, with borrowed values and borrowed dreams. But when we dare to face them, when we stop numbing ourselves and confront the finitude of our existence, we are invited to awaken. Awareness of mortality, far from being a curse, becomes a catalyst. If life is short, then what are you waiting for? If tomorrow is not promised, then why not live today with truth? The process of awakening the authentic self is rarely comfortable. Freud argued that much of human behavior is driven by unconscious forces, desires and fears we would rather not see. Jung deepened this by suggesting that wholeness requires facing the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress or deny. Authenticity, then, begins not with grand gestures, but with courage. The courage to turn inward, to acknowledge the parts of ourselves that are wounded, selfish, afraid, or imperfect. It is only by embracing the whole of who we are that we can step into an authentic life. Yalom describes therapy as a journey where this authenticity is nurtured in relationship. When a patient allows themselves to be fully seen, without masks, without defense, and is still accepted, something remarkable happens. The false self begins to dissolve, and the authentic self emerges. This process is not limited to therapy. In any relationship where truth is spoken and vulnerability is embraced, the authentic self can awaken. It is as if another person's recognition gives us permission to be who we already were, but had long hidden. But authenticity is not only about relationships, it is also about choices. The existentialists remind us that freedom is both a gift and a burden. We are free to choose, but with that freedom comes responsibility. To live authentically means to stop blaming fate, society, or circumstance, and to own the decisions we make. This is terrifying because it eliminates excuses. Yet it is also liberating because it returns power to our own hands. Jean-Paul Sartre captured this paradox when he said, "Man is condemned to be free. We cannot escape freedom, we can only deny it or embrace it." Awakening the authentic self requires the latter. The authentic self is not discovered once and for all. It is created moment by moment. Every time you choose honesty over convenience, courage over fear, or love over indifference, you carve a path toward authenticity. Frankl illustrated this truth in the camps when he observed that even in the most brutal conditions, individuals could still choose their stance towards suffering. In choosing dignity, compassion, or hope, they affirmed their authentic humanity in the face of dehumanization. For Frankl, the authentic self was inseparable from meaning. It was forged in the act of taking responsibility for one's existence, no matter the circumstances. Yet the journey is not without resistance. Many people prefer the safety of conformity. Jung warned that individuals who suppress their authentic self often project their unlived lives onto others, envying those who live boldly while secretly fearing the consequences of doing so themselves. This is why the midlife crisis, often ridiculed, is actually a profound psychological turning point. It is the moment when the soul cries out against years of compromise and demands to be heard. Yalom, too, noted that confronting mortality often serves as a wake-up call, a reminder that time is running out and that only authenticity can bring peace. Awakening the authentic self also requires embracing impermanence. To be authentic is to live with the awareness that nothing lasts forever, neither success nor failure, neither joy nor suffering. This awareness can strip away the obsession with appearances and possessions, redirecting energy toward what truly matters: relationships, creativity, compassion, and self-expression. It is in these pursuits that the authentic self flourishes, because they are grounded in values that transcend external validation. Think for a moment of the difference between acting and being. Acting is shaped by scripts, roles, and expectations. Being flows naturally, without pretense. Children often embody this being. They laugh when they are joyful, cry when they are sad, and express wonder without shame. Over time, society teaches them to mask these impulses. The task of adulthood is not to preserve the child's innocence, but to reclaim the child's authenticity tempered with the wisdom of experience. Awakening the authentic self is not about rejecting the world. It is about engaging with it more fully, without hiding. It means saying yes when you mean yes, and no when you mean no. It means living in harmony with your deepest values, rather than being enslaved to the values imposed upon you. And it means accepting the consequences of your freedom, not as burdens, but as expressions of a life lived truly. As Yalom reminds us, authenticity is both fragile and powerful. It demands vulnerability, but it offers liberation. It reveals our mortality, but it deepens our capacity to live. In the end, the authentic self is not something to be found, but something to be lived day by day, choice by choice, until the final breath. When we pause to reflect on the vast sweep of human history, one truth becomes clear. It is not our physical strength, our wealth, or even our survival that defines us most deeply. What endures is the legacy of the mind, the thoughts we shape, the meanings we create, and the transformations we ignite in ourselves and in others. The human mind, fragile and mortal as it may seem, carries within it a power far greater than the span of an individual life. It is through the mind that we question, that we suffer, that we love, and ultimately, that we leave a mark beyond our own existence. Irvin Yalom devoted his life to exploring how the mind, when faced with the ultimate concerns of existence, becomes both a source of anguish and a vessel of growth. He understood that consciousness is a double-edged sword. It reveals our mortality and isolation, but it also gives us the ability to transcend them through creativity, love, and meaning-making. In Staring at the Sun, Yalom described how the terror of death often hides beneath the surface of daily life, subtly shaping decisions and behaviors. Yet rather than viewing this terror as purely destructive, he showed how the confrontation with death can awaken in us a drive to live more fully, to transform our existence into something that carries significance. The mind's greatest capacity lies in its ability to reinterpret experience. Freud believed that insight into unconscious processes could liberate us from repeating cycles of suffering. Jung, in turn, emphasized the transformative power of symbols, dreams, and archetypes, seeing the mind as a theater where the personal and collective meet. Both perspectives highlight the same truth: the mind is not static. It is capable of profound metamorphosis. When we bring the hidden into awareness, when we integrate what was once fragmented, we are reshaped. In that reshaping lies transformation. But transformation is never merely personal, it ripples outward. Yalom often emphasized the therapeutic relationship as a space where authenticity and healing are co-created. In such moments, one person's courage to face truth inspires another's. This is legacy in its purest form, not the monuments we build or the accolades we collect, but the impact we have on the consciousness of another human being. As he once wrote, "Ripples of our existence extend far beyond our limited lifespan." A single act of kindness, a word of wisdom, or a moment of deep presence can echo across generations in ways we cannot foresee. Viktor Frankl, whose insights were forged in the crucible of suffering, spoke of the human capacity to find meaning even in the most brutal circumstances. For him, the mind's ultimate freedom was the ability to choose one's attitude towards suffering. This freedom, exercised even in the camps, became a legacy not only for Frankel's fellow prisoners, but for millions who later read his words. Here we see how the mind, when aligned with meaning, transcends physical limits. It transforms pain into testimony, despair into resilience, mortality into legacy. To live with the awareness of the mind's transformative potential is to recognize that each of us, no matter how ordinary we may appear, carries within us seeds of legacy. We leave traces in the stories others tell about us, in the comfort we offer, in the truths we dare to speak. Even our failures can become legacies if they inspire others to live differently. In this sense, the authentic mind is never wasted. Its influence is woven into the fabric of human connection. Yet legacy is not about grandiosity. Many imagine it as something reserved for the famous, the powerful, or the extraordinary. Existential psychology reminds us otherwise. Legacy is created in the small, almost invisible acts of daily life. When a parent listens to a child with patience, when a friend sits silently beside another in grief, when a teacher awakens curiosity in a student, these are moments of legacy. The transformation of one mind, however quiet, can alter the trajectory of a life and, in doing so, ripple outward into the world. The question then is not whether we leave a legacy, but what kind of legacy we choose to leave. Sartre argued that existence precedes essence. We are not born with a predetermined identity, but instead we define ourselves through our actions. Each decision we make inscribes itself into the narrative of who we are. Each moment of authenticity, each expression of love, each creative act contributes to a legacy that reflects our truest values. Awareness of mortality sharpens this responsibility. If life is finite, then every moment matters. If time is limited, then procrastination becomes a form of self-betrayal. Yalom often noted that the confrontation with death jolts people awake to the urgency of living. The legacy of the mind is forged not in some distant future, but in the immediacy of the present. Every conversation, every choice, every act of courage becomes part of the tapestry we leave behind. Perhaps the most profound truth is that the mind is both a vessel of suffering and the very tool by which we transcend it. It generates fear, but it also generates meaning. It isolates us, but it also connects us through empathy and imagination. It reminds us of death, but it also allows us to envision immortality in the form of love, art, and memory. The transformation of the mind is, in the end, the transformation of life itself. As we reflect on this journey from authenticity to freedom, from suffering to meaning, it becomes clear that our greatest responsibility is not only to live, but to live consciously. To nurture the mind as both a source of personal transformation and as a gift we leave to others. When we embrace this truth, life ceases to be merely survival. It becomes creation, connection, and legacy. In the final analysis, the measure of a life is not how long it lasted, but how deeply it touched others. The mind, awakened and authentic, ensures that even when the body returns to dust, something essential continues. The ripples of transformation, the echoes of love, the legacy of meaning. If this journey into the hidden power of the human mind inspired you, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and join our growing community where we dive even deeper into the wisdom of Irvin Yalom and other great thinkers. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might spark someone else's transformation. And remember, every view, every like, every word you share helps us keep exploring the incredible potential within us all. Stay curious, stay connected, and I'll see you in the next video.